even though that's sort of an Orwellian term because it was safe only to do the killing there. And that was viewed as a genocide. Now, you have something comparable ongoing during those 30 days in January of 2009 in Sri Lanka. That is, the government used aerial bombardments and artilleries to drive 350,000 civilians in the north and northeast into the Mullaitivu. And once they got them there in this so-called safe area, as we saw Mr. Rajapaksa describe this, then they turned and bombed and put artillery shells in there, killed perhaps 750 or 800, wounded, seriously wounded up to 2,500, had further displacements, and moreover, the Defense Secretary, Mr. Rajapaksa, had explained that in his mind, if you were not in the safe area, which was really a killing field, it's about as absurd as calling Auschwitz the safe area for the Jews as they got exterminated. And Mr. Rajapaksa said, if you're not in that safe area where they're going to kill you, they viewed you as then deserving of destruction. Nothing was to exist, in his words, outside the safe area. So if you're a hospital,
the safe area, that's going to be the same story.
Exactly, of course. So that there isn't it's catch-22. If you're in the safe area, they bomb an artillery shell. If you're out, then you don't have a right to exist, and you're in the hospital, and then they drop cluster bombs on you. So this is an example, I think, of the confession of the genocidal intent. What is the purpose of this? They're trying to destroy the Tamils in whole or in substantial part, in the words of our Genocide Accountability Act. Moreover, it's very clear from his comments that he also made on that BBC interview that he views anybody who criticizes what the government does as a traitor. A traitor is what? Someone who you can kill because they've defected from their country, so to speak. And that is the mentality that we're dealing with here. And Mr. Fonseca, in interviews he's given with the media, has described Sri Lanka as a Sinhala country, where Tamils don't even get cameo appearances in his description of that country. And what we've done in this genocide indictment is to explain how it is that in Sri Lanka a culture of genocide has emerged over the last 60 years based upon their reading of the myths of the Mahavamsa, the teachings of Dharmapala, the Buddhist monks. They keep repeating over and over again, this is a Sinhalese Buddhist nation. We are the only people who belong on the island. That's our self-determination. And they say Tamils can go elsewhere. They have their state, Tamil Nadu, but we don't have any other state of Sinhalese Buddhists other than this island. No one else belongs here. That is precisely the idea. That's the mindset of genocide, that you're alien unless you're Sinhalese Buddhist, and that's what we find that was ongoing during the years that have ensued since Mr. Rajapaksa came to power as Defense Secretary, Sarath Fonseca's lieutenant commander, and the Mahinda, Mr. Rajapaksa's brother, being the president.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the actual history you were just referring to, how this genocidal culture was part of the Sinhala nation, rather. It is rather interesting that you point out that it has been a part of their history as to how they came into being who they are. Could you elaborate a little more on that?
Yes, countries and peoples live oftentimes by symbols and myths. They speak volumes about how they view themselves. And during the centuries before independence, the ability of the Sinhalese Buddhists to impose their rather ethnocentric view of the island was limited because they didn't have the power. It was in the British ever since really 1818 up until 1948. But the teachings of their leaders was always and remains, this is a Sinhala Buddhist island. The Mahavamsa teachings, which for them, if it would be comparable, say, to the teachings of the Holy Quran for Muslims. It's just the gospel. And it teaches that, the kings that were to be celebrated in the Sinhalese Buddhist history are those who destroyed the Tamils. It said, well, you're an alien force here. It doesn't matter whether they're true or false. That's just inculcated in the Sinhalese Buddhist mind from day one. And they get it in the classroom, they get it in the dinner table, they get it when they go into the temples. And I think that explains why that in Sri Lanka there has been just one prosecution and punishment of a Sinhalese Buddhist in 60 years, because the whole culture believes, if you're not Sinhalese Buddhist, you just don't belong here. And even if they're not all actively involved in the genocide, they become so by their silence, by their tacit acceptance of this effort to destroy the Tamils in whole or in part. And even today it kept being reinforced. You know, there's a Buddhist monk party that now has maybe a little less than a dozen seats in the Sri Lankan parliament. And they had the what I would call the ill distinction of protesting the ceasefire. You know, could you imagine Buddhist monks saying, it's so bad that there's peace. You know, we need to go back and fight again. Now, that turns real Buddha on his head, so to speak. And that, I think, goes back to explain this culture of genocide. That is, the mindset that no one blogs on this island except Sinhalese Buddhists. And even the organizations today, the private organizations in Sri Lanka that are composed of the Sinhalese Buddhists, they repeatedly state, we don't have any other country but this island. The other people need to go elsewhere because they have other countries. Again, this idea that you need to get out. We're going to destroy you. And that also finds expression in the composition of the armed forces, the security services. They're all Sinhalese. You won't find a Tamil anywhere because they don't trust them. No, you are vassals. You can't have arms or anything like that.
Okay. Very interesting. We're going to jump into the actual indictments right after a short break. When we come back, we'll talk about the 12 counts of genocide these two people are facing. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. You're either watching or listening to the show through the many different television networks or through the radio services. We're talking to Bruce Fein, the attorney for Tamils for Justice, Tamils against genocide rather, based out of US, and we're talking about the criminal indictment against Sarath Fonseca and Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Now, we've set the stage. I think we should get into the actual 12 counts of criminal charges against these people. Now, I understand these 12 counts are not all individual counts in a way, or are they? How do you come up with these 12 counts?
The terms of the statute are an attempt to destroy a group based upon race, religion, nationality, or ethnicity in whole or in substantial part, but it doesn't self-define what's the geographic area you look at to determine whether there was this attempt. So what we did is we took at the discrete regional areas in Sri Lanka, in the north and in the east, and decided those were separate counts of genocide because there was an attempt to destroy the Tamils in whole or in substantial part in each of those particular regions, 5 regions, the couple regions in the north and the east and the west. And then also we found village clusters ranging from anywhere from a half dozen to a dozen villages, where within those villages, as subsets of these regions, so there was a particular effort to destroy the Tamils in whole or in substantial part.
I guess this goes again to sort of emphasize the point. Genocide is not, you don't have to entirely clear out a race from a country.
It is, yeah, it's not only that. If, again, we're reading the terms of the statute, we're not just making this up. This is written down in the U.S. Code. It's not only the success, but an attempt to destroy a group in whole or in substantial part within a regionally significant place. Let's go back to the Srebrenica, which is an actual case of genocide in Bosnia. Srebrenica wasn't even close to being all of Bosnia at all, yet that was viewed as a genocide, and there were 7,000 about Muslims who were killed at that particular incident. What we've documented here, and this is the charging portion of the genocide indictment relating to the years that Rajapaksa has been ruling since November of 2005, is 3,750 killings or extrajudicial disappearances, something like 20,000 wounded, over 1.3 million displacements, and also a persistent creation of conditions of life intended to destroy the Tamils in whole or in substantial part physically. Now, what did they do? We've able to document that the government would starve the Tamils by curtailing rations. They would withhold medicines that would expose them to disease, malaria, diphtheria, customary diseases. They would shortchange hospitals.